And we are live. Well, hello and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am Nico from Nico's Book Reviews, and we are here today to talk about Lord of Emperors, as Ben was holding up here, showing us book 2 in the Sarantine Mosaic. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about the Sarantine Mosaic as a whole as well. But I am joined by my esteemed colleagues, Ben and Zamar, which I'll let you guys introduce yourselves here. We can start with you, Zamar.
Yeah, sure. So I am not too much of a booktuber, I suppose. I have a channel which a video or two has been posted on every now and then. But I am an aspiring author, so I wrote this book, and I've been joining these guys for some GGK reads, which has been great fun. Yeah, Ben's holding up my 2 books, and yeah, so I love doing sailing to Sorrento with these two, and we just dove right into Lord of Emperors, and it was a great time.
I'm going to add, because I forgot to do it, I'm going to add to the description both of your guys' channels. So very shortly, you guys will be able to check out their channels in the description.
I'm Ben from Books of Genghis Khan. I've had Nico on my channel a couple times, so happy to be going on his for a chat of one of my favorite authors, Guy Gabriel Kay. So this was a blast doing this buddy read with you both.
Yes, it's been a lot of fun.
And you like raced through it, man. Nico and I were like going at a similar pace. We finished it like a month after you.
Yeah, I was full steam ahead. Just
because I think you hit like the halfway point, and then the next day you messaged, you were like, "I'm done." And I was like, "Did you finish half the book in like 1 or 2 days?"
Yeah. Also, I've had more reading time because my wife has traveled back to visit with her family, and so I have just like a lot more just alone time, reading time right now, and so
helps.
when I'm into a book, I can just spend a bunch of hours with it and make massive headway, and that's also how it's my preferred reading experience of just like getting lost in one story for hours at a time. Is just where you're living it, and there's almost no other distractions coming in. So
I used to do that more, and I miss doing it, and I ended up doing that a little bit with this one, although it still took me forever because my reading time is a lot less still than normal with the baby. But just Guy Gabriel Kay is such a great author to do that with, and so I really focused and did physical only this time, which also was just nice because that's my preferred Guy Gabriel Kay reading experience, and it was a good time. It was a good time.
Yeah, this was 100% ebook for me. It was a good.
That still counts. It's like there is something though, like literally even above ebook, like physical for Guy Gabriel Kay does just feel better. I don't know what it is. It's the kind of book I think, but
yeah. I could see that. See, for myself, I just can't be bothered with turning pages. Like that's just me. Like I love the feeling of holding a book, where it's like, oh man, I gotta turn the page. It's such a pain in the butt. Like I'd just rather just have a Kindle, you know. You go through it.
That's so fair because I will find myself when I have both as an option sometimes, I will just find myself feeling lazy and grabbing the Kindle so I don't have to hold the book. So I definitely get that. That's where like I never thought I would convert away from like being solely physical media, but I do love digital reading so much with audio, with ebooks. It just is so convenient. And like I hate having to read a physical book in bed, and I usually do a decent amount of reading before bed, and so that's been the big thing that I'm just like I can have a little Kindle that lights up, and it's great. That
so
one
Marcy,
maybe is good for
you
ebook.
You didn't do the physical Shogun, right?
No, that was fully audio for me.
Yeah, like
my hands are not big enough to hold that, you
know. Oh goodness. I used to be the guy. I'd lug around the big Stormlight books and everything, and just be carrying this giant book, and people like, "What is that? What is it? What do you have there? Is that the Bible or something?" Like,
that's Shalom at the front. Yeah.
I usually took the dust jackets off.
The other thing is like I don't know about you guys. I have a habit of like pacing around when I read. I just pace around a lot generally, but I have like a room in the basement. There's like a nice walking strip. I just go back and forth while reading. And so if you have a physical book and you're pacing around, the lighting is just uneven. You know, it's like there's shadows when you're going this way and you turn around and go the other way. So then like ebook just makes it so easy, you know.
Wow, you can read while you pace. That's amazing physical coordination.
That's
I get
pretty
tired
good.
of sitting, man. That's all it is.
That's fair. That's fair.
That's a good way to get your steps in.
Yeah. That's where if I'm walking around, I usually just do like audio.
Yeah.
It's where like during the months where we don't have snow and I'm mowing the lawn, I always get a nice chunk of audio and mowing the lawn.
Yes.
Mm.
Exactly.
So anyway, Lord of Emperor. Good conversation, but so what did everybody think? We can start with kind of a non-spoiler, and I imagine we'll go into spoiler pretty quick because if you're watching this, you probably want spoilers. But we'll start with just kind of general reactions to the book. Whoever wants to go.
You go for it, Z. You go for it.
I mean, I thought it was awesome. You know, like we sailing to Sorrentium. Of course, we had a great chat about that, but it was kind of a book in two parts where you have this journey portion, and then you get to Sorrentium, and then you get embroiled into the court politics. And for me personally, I like the second part of that more, even though I love both parts. And then in Lord of Emperors, it was all in Sorrentium. It was all about the court politics. It was all just, yeah, it's just awesome, man. Like it felt like there was a really strong narrative thrust to this book, like especially after the first third, or maybe up to about after like the first half. The book just carried you, and it had this way of like it had that non-put downable quality, which is, you know, we cherish so much. And yeah, like to me, I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, right there with you. I read it in just a couple days because of that quality that it had, and just it's almost impossible to find fault with it. The writing is just crackling with energy and just clever dialogue and deep thoughts everywhere you look, and I mean, just classic GGK at this point with all of that. But the plotting really was tense and exciting, and some just amazing sequences that played out, and it was pretty unpredictable for me. I know we'll get into spoilers. I think it was a little bit more predictable for some of you, but I just did not see what was coming around each turn, and so I was blown away with some of these developments, and really satisfied with where it ended. Honestly, it was just amazing. It was such a good experience though, where I'm like, man, I almost wish I had saved it and not read so many GGK books this year. Like my first year of GGK, so many amazing books, and I think I've gone for like some of his most highly praised, most beloved ones too. Song for Our Bone, Lions of Our Sun, Brightness Long Go, and then Serentine Mosaic. And I'm almost like feel that I should have just left these until I was like missing his style more, right? Because like I would notice like a lot of similar echoes of character archetypes, or just plotting, or the way that he writes felt very familiar, and so I was almost wishing that I had left more time so I could kind of miss it and then come back to it. But I mean, that is not the book's fault though. That is my fault for reading too many good, amazing books too close together. But it was great. It was great.
Do you think stylistically, is this like similar to? Because I think that these two books are quite different from A Brightness Long Ago, which is the only other one I've read. But do you think stylistically it's pretty similar to his other books, like Lions and Song of Arbonne and stuff like that?
Not okay. There are just very, very much like GGK-isms. You will see K-isms where there's some similar things. But this one was quite different, I felt, with like Crispin as the main character and kind of especially the first book, I felt quite different. But then there's also just certain things that he does, and like Ben was saying, you'll see certain kind of character archetypes that he really likes to have and to explore as well. And so you'll see echoes of it, I think. As you continue, but this one was a little bit different, especially in the first book. The second book felt a lot more like the K I'm used to, I will say, though.
Mm.
Granted, Ben, you've read
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
than I have, so
Yeah, no, I think the actual kind of prose style was a little like Brightness is definitely the outlier in terms of just doing some extra few different authorly tricks and changes in perspective and tense, and so that one I think he was being more experimental, and so the actual kind of prose style I think is more similar to like Lions and Arbonne here than Brightness. So yeah, I would expect if you read Lions that'll feel more like this in terms of just like the writing style. But yeah, it feels unique. It still feels very fresh in terms of the setting being Byzantium. Like I've never spent time in this particular setting before, or an analog to it. So that was fun. Like post Roman Empire. So this just has like an interesting feel to it. And then these very particular characters though, he brings everyone to life in 3 dimensions, and everyone feels unique and has their own motivations and backstory and priorities and way that they view the world and way that they speak and interact with others. And so even if there are some similar archetypes like a doctor or an artist or a scheming kind of king who's also not a bad ruler, is like some of these archetypes are repeating, but what he does with them in each individual case is so unique and exciting.
oh yeah.
So, yeah.
GGK is so good that even when you notice those things, you don't care because he's doing such a good job with them. Because like I read Lions and Arbonne pretty close together, and those two have a lot of echoes of things that you can see. They're very different books with a very different focus, but there are certain things that you can really see that that Kay's kind of doing this sort of thing. Like he very often likes to have a young character that's kind of interested in a little bit of an older character as a love interest. That usually is unrequited, and like that's kind of like there's certain things like that which you didn't have in this book as much, but like there's things like that I've noticed. But he does do a really good job with it. I feel like I'm still, despite how much I really did love my experience reading this, I feel like I'm still a little bit of the outlier because, Ben, I can find some fault, namely that Crispin is still in this book. And if he wasn't, if there was no Crispin, I think I would have loved this even more. Which I had a really great time with this as well. But I like all of the Crispin parts. And I also feel like I'm an outlier because Crispin and the chariot racing, I just like, they were fine, but I wasn't, for some reason, it just didn't work as well for me. But then pretty much the rest of it, and like the new character Rustum in this one, I would have read a whole book about Rustum. I don't care if I've already read a doctor book. I'm like, I would have read it again. I thought it was such an interesting character, but like the themes, the parts, the things it was exploring, I loved so many parts of this that my complaints just didn't even matter one bit. So I even wasn't super pleased with the ending, but I'm like, yeah, I don't even care. I loved so much about this book. It just, there was so much good. It vastly outweighed any of my complaints. And so, yeah, I had a really good time with it.
I feel like Crispin took a bit of a backseat. Is that just me? Like he was still.
Oh, absolutely.
It felt like he was the main character, but definitely less so than in book 1. Like I thought there would be more Crispin POVs than we had.
Oh yeah, because he was by far the main. He was like by far the main character in Sailing to Serenium. So he was more just like the lead member of an ensemble in Lord of Emperors. So that was that was a nice development for Nico. and for
Yes.
yeah.
That was very much a plus for me. I know that's weird. Like, yeah, the main character was in it less, so I liked it more. But I just like I didn't like Crispin annoyed me a lot less in this one. He was also in it less, but for me, like it was all of those other elements and the other characters that just really, really shined for me. And so for the cook Stramosis, and
Yes.
like the cookbook, like I loved that. That was such a small, not really that important part.
Yeah.
But hold on. I'm gonna just go ahead and I
Yeah.
I feel like I'm gonna slip if nobody else does. But like it was such a small and unimportant in the grand scheme of things, but it played in so heavily to the themes of legacy and to the themes of loss when it's very personal to you, because there's a lot of huge things going on, but to Shimosis, it's the fact that his like apprentice cook might die, and like that is just like the worst possible, most personal thing to him and to his legacy. And it was just such a great way of taking this B plot and making it really, really resonate with the central themes so well. And that's such a K thing to do. It just
Yeah, there are
he's
not a lot
so
of
good
other
at that.
authors that do that where they're giving you a very minor POV that is just like kind of out of the spotlight. Um and you're right. That is such a highlight of this. And just like when Kairos got stabbed and I thought he was dead, I was devastated. And we got like just a few pages of Kairos. But
Yeah,
like Kay
like
had me
there's
devastated that he's not going to live out his potential as, a chef. And then Rustem to the rescue, like Kay setting up Rustem so that he could save oh man, what's the blues chariot driver? No, the Scordius, yeah. So that he could save Scordius, so that he could save Kairos. Like I knew that Rustem was gonna pay off in the plot, but him being there and like to rescue Kairos, I didn't realize it would pay off that much. And like Rustem, kudos to him. Like Kay put him through the ringer. He's like spending all night like patching up like random people at the blues compound. He's like, I'm headed home. I'm beat. And then he's like, okay, I'll take another patient. And
Such a good moment.
yes. And
but
what's
see,
like, yeah.
no, I was just gonna say, like, we're jumping the gun there because the introduction, very first, the prologue, I think it was a prologue, where we were first introduced to Rustem or Rustem.
Yeah.
That was like, oh, man, that was so good. It's just this short little story that starts off Lord of Emperors, and I think all three of us were like, that was so good. Like, just that first prologue.
It was incredible. Like just like amazing world building. Like we're in a new place, a new culture, and you learn like through just like complete lack of info dumps too. Just like elegant like world building of the cultural norms of what the politics is like, because you see kind of the viewpoint from like the emperor's side of this, and like also like a common person with Rustem and his family, and just like, man, what efficient world building in that chapter, and character building too, because like you came to really care about Rustem and get this like full picture of his life without like inelegant info dumps or long like bits of introspection of thinking about what's brought him to this point and everything. So yeah, incredibly efficient chapter 1.
See, I am questioning now because I think I said Rustum and you said Rustum, Ben, and like Rustum, I'm like that's probably right, but I don't know how it's pronounced, and so I'm like, which one is right?
Either way,
I would say somebody will eventually come yell at me. I always get yelled at when I mispronounce names because I have some very prominent mispronounced names because I read them without ever knowing the right pronunciation too many times. So my brain just decides in a split second, and it doesn't matter if it makes sense. That's just what it is.
I think you'll be okay as long as you don't say like jazz now. You're fine.
I forced myself to not, because I got yelled at a lot for Stormlight names. Actually, that and Wheel of Time, people got really mad at me, but some of the names, the way they're actually pronounced, like tick me off. So, um, it's just
This
I'm like,
this
this
is
is
such a
dumb.
like Rustam's introduction though. Kay likes this character archetype of the noble doctor who really sticks to their medical oaths to treat people to the best of their ability and not worry about the personal consequences. Like this showed up in Lines of Alrasan, and I think just like a few years later, he's writing this again in Lord of Emperors, because it must be something that really speaks to him. And just like but I loved it. I loved getting it again, where he's
He added
just
in
like,
the brightness as well. Remember?
yeah. You're right. You're right there. That was like what, 20 years after this that he wrote that again. Maybe it's in some of the other books in between too.
It could be.
Yeah.
And he felt like such a distinct character from the Doctor in Lions. It did immediately remind me of that, but that's what I like too. And you see him as like, he's such a distinct individual, and like in some ways he's like, if you use like our morality, like not necessarily the best, like he's got 2 wives, but he goes off and he's like, oh, the servant here, she'll do nicely to keep me company while I'm away from my wives and everything. And so
the bed warm.
and it, and it's not like it's like just like specific. That's just kind of like he thinks that's pretty normal, and it probably is for him at the time and things like that too. And but just I that's why both of these books, even though it's like 2 parts of one book, they both have such good standalone potential because of what's set up. And this one, with that setup, I was hooked from the beginning, and I was so interested, and I really loved that plot line. I do like that Heidi agrees with me on the end, though.
Yeah. We'll get there.
We will for sure.
Like Rustam, I love also that he was just dragged to that wedding party, and like that, like there's this big scene where all these characters intersect because of Carillus and Kasha's wedding party, and like that scene was cool. Like, and just seeing a lot of the court politics playing out.
But also like how we got to that scene. Like the wedding scene was, I think awesome. Like I love that scene. But also like Rustam shows up in the big city, and his friend / minder who he's there with just gets murked right off the bat.
Yeah,
he's like unloading the horse. Cleander goes and stabs him, and you're like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, like because Cleander is like some kind of hooligan senator's son, like all of a sudden Rustam is just dragged up into the politics of the city.
I love that it was it's a minor character from Sailing to Serentium. It's Crispin's apprentice Pardos, who just happens to see him in trouble and helps lead him to safety. Like, I love that there are all these like coincidences in the GGK books that like that's why I love reading fiction books like this, because like little things end up coming back around in interesting fatalistic ways to like play out in maybe like more coincidences than we would expect in real life, but I love it that Pardos ended up becoming a meaningful character without even that many pages, and just like seeing like Pardos reunite with Crispin, and like Crispin was like about to yell at someone like, you shouldn't be up here, and then he like was so happy to see Pardos, and he might have been hard on him back when he was the apprentice, but you could see like the genuine respect and love he had for him when they reunited. Like just like really mature emotional beats played out like that.
Yeah. Well, Kay is so good at having the small things not only not feel forced, because he's so good at weaving all of these little elements, these little characters, that the progression feels natural. It feels like that could have happened, but it so often happens in such a tragic way too, and just at the way those things go. And I thought too, like the whole thing with Cleander as well, his arc, while being a very small side character and one that you feel like very, like, oh, this guy is absolute garbage to start with. and you start there, and then like his arc and like the way he ends up too, where he apparently becomes like kind of an important philosopher, like writer guy later on and everything. But and then I did the comment where it's from Rustam's point of view, where he's like, oh, and he knows that he was like disallowed from going to the chariot races for 3 days, which is something to be discussed, where the punishment for killing a man is missing 3 days of amusements. But that's neither here nor there, and just kind of moves on. And just those lines, like, oh gosh, all of those interactions were just so good. And
Yeah, like seeing
man,
Rustam like try to figure out the Sarantium culture is one of my favorite parts of the book. It's always like these
Yeah.
people really like their horse races, I guess. I don't get it.
So speaking of, because since it happens early, and I know it's revealed later, and then when it was revealed, I'm like, I feel like I should have caught that, but I think it was so early, I wasn't maybe paying close enough attention. But did you guys catch the fact that the Empress came to see Rustam like really early on in the book to ask about having a child, and like that happened
No,
on
I did
screen,
not.
like. Okay, at least it just
Did-
wasn't just me, because like in retrospect I'm like, that makes so much sense, because the way he
Yeah.
described it, you knew something relevant was going on, but it just like it was so subtle, I completely missed it, and I felt like I should have gotten it later, but completely missed it. I'm like, oh, that's such a good reveal.
I don't think he knew either, right? Like he just thought it was
No,
some
no.
random
Yep.
lady.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was his conclusion? It was that you were fine, you can have a child. Is that his conclusion?
No, it was the Emperor that was the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
And
sometimes
it seemed like she kind of always knew or suspected that, but just like there's even comments like it's not something you bring up with a powerful man, that it might be his fault. And it's just kind of that little comment, like she always knew, but maybe just didn't want to bring it up. And that brought the whole legacy thing again, another full circle, because legacy was such an important theme here. It was just like another facet of that I just think, gosh, this was so good. We have Sheeran's bird running track. So I think with Sheeran's bird, like she didn't really want to go.
Yeah, and Zodicus didn't come to Sarantium, so Zodicus was the one who knew how to set the birds free, and so he took all of his back to the wood where he would set them free. But he didn't come to collect Sheeran's bird.
Yeah, I assumed that the bird had to go to the wood because that's where she was meant to be claimed by the whatever bison god dude.
Yeah. I did think it was really interesting how, even though that was much less of a feature in this one, it came back around with on the island with somebody else has that and has done that as well, and so it's not as unique as you think. I thought it was kind of an interesting little tidbit.
Yeah.
I was very confused about that. I was like, did he get the bird from Zodicus, or did he like make his own?
I think he just got it from someone else.
Yeah, it didn't outright say it, but the way I took it from like the implication is just that somebody else independently basically came up with a similar thing. Because I think his was described more as like, a pendant or something. It wasn't a bird, or maybe it was. I can't remember for sure now. But yeah, it seemed like it's just kind of like, oh, Zodicus thought maybe he was the only one who'd ever figured this out, but apparently somebody else has too. It's one of those things sometimes that kind of thing can feel like, oh, you're just shoving that in here as well. But here it kind of, I thought it was really interesting, just because like, well, it's implied that he got this from somewhere way far off, where they practice magics or something. And so that was interesting. I can see that. I didn't really want him to end up with anybody personally. I wanted a more open-ended, he goes off on his own to find himself, and all of the women are just fine not being with the ladies' man, Crispin.
No, dude, Crispin's too hot. Like everyone thinks he's hot, man. Like,
I gotta give Kay credit. I gotta give Kay credit for like not following through with how I thought he would on some of the romantic stuff. Like, it seemed like Crispin and Sheeran had chemistry together, and but like I thought they were gonna end up getting together in some form or another romantically, but that didn't happen. And then like Scordius came when he got denied from, he was trying to visit like his lover, and that was the Bonosis, like the head of the Senate's wife, but he was like, he couldn't go visit her, and so like he saw, that was his snap decision of like, oh, you know, I'm gonna drop in on Sheeran, and that was fateful, of course, because it led to his almost getting killed when he was leaving. But like I didn't want him and Sharon to actually like do anything, because I was like, oh, I was hoping Sharon and Crispin like would like, but like, you know, it just didn't play out that way, and it played out, I think, organic to the characters, and like all the characters had agency, and were living out lives, and not abiding by whatever wish fulfillment I might have had living through Crispin, and so yeah, I felt it was intriguing and unpredictable, like what he ended up doing with the different, you know, romantic entanglements, or what he didn't do with them. So I don't know, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of strange. Or I mean, I feel the same way, where I thought that Sharon and Crispin kind of, I like the chemistry there. But then Crispin liked the traitorous like revenge lady instead. And
but like, it was almost like he just got entangled with her because, you know, she wanted that. It was like,
yeah,
he was just like going along.
He has like
ride.
a magic spell on him, I guess.
Everybody loves Crispin.
But like, it wasn't even Crispin. It was just like this woman, Delena, knew that like some crazy stuff was about to go down, and she just like, I think, wanted to be with anyone that was not her husband, and Crispin was there. So it's just like, you know, I don't think it was about Crispin in particular, but just someone who she knew she could have maybe a memorable night with, and man, Kate did not hold back. That was intense. Like, you don't want to read that scene in public. Like, that was intense, and you know, he could turn up the heat. And I've heard some of his other books like Tigana that there's a lot of that going on.
That's why I've been so hesitant to read Tigana, because there's the first one happens very early on, and I've skimmed a part of it, and I'm like, oh boy, that's awkward. I'm not personally a fan of sex scenes in books. Never really have been, and so you can blame Robert Jordan. He got me used to the behind the curtain stuff, and that is my preference.
Yeah.
You know, it depends on the character, right? If it's like Crispin, I'm like, you go, my boy. And I'm like, I'm sitting there on the sidelines, like cheering for him. Yeah, buddy, go get it. But at the same time, like that scene, it was intense because I'm like, oh my god, she's gonna screw him over somehow. Like, why are you going for this one? There's like a billion other like pretty ladies after you, buddy. But you know, I mean, yeah, it ended up really interesting. I was very surprised by the ending. I don't know about you.
So
guys.
can we start talking about I don't know if we want to jump towards the major climactic moment, but like I looked up, or maybe one of you said it during our Sarantine chat about like the Sarantine Emperor was supposed to be a modeled on Justinian, and Alexana on Justinian's Empress, and so I just like looked them up to see what like the history was around it, and Justinian like accomplished a ton, and I don't think he got like assassinated prematurely or anything. I didn't really want to see what happened, but I think he like reigned for a long time and accomplished a lot. And so I was not expecting the assassination, and so that came as a huge shock. Like once Aliana and Crispin were on the island, and like she realized that they were being set up to be killed, I was like, oh, the Emperor's gonna get out of it one way or another. And then when we go back to the Emperor and he is like in the tunnel and he realizes he's being chased, like he's so smart, I'm thinking he's gonna find a way to get out of it. And he almost did, if not for that stupid, like jealous, like
Scribe.
historian aid of one of the other characters, like Pretenius, or who was there to to stab him in the back and kill him. And so that all played out in just like shocking, jaw-dropping. I'm like, oh my god, like this really like clever, like interesting emperor just got assassinated, and like what is going to happen now? So that was pretty unexpected for me. I know Z, you kind of saw that coming, but I also, because of Justinian, it didn't happen to Justinian. I thought he was safe.
So like I didn't know much about Justinian before starting this book, but then once I was making my way through it, I started doing some research, but I did not want to know how he died because I was like, that's going to be a spoiler for sure. So I didn't look into it. But to me, it was just because of that repeated motif, like the line where uncrown the Lord of Emperors awaits, like over and over. He said it in Tarantium, he said it in Lord of Emperors. I was like, the name of the second book is Lord of the Emperor. The Emperor's gonna die. This is like, you know, like I predicted it in book one, to be honest, but I didn't want it to happen. And when it was happening, I was like, oh, get out of there, Red! Like, come on. But
Yeah,
I didn't end up.
The further I got in, the more I kind of was feeling like that was going to happen as well. Which I mean, and yeah, Ben, you're right, because Justinian actually lived to a pretty old age, I think, and reigned for like a really long time. But yeah, and that was where I think, because I commented, I've read some other books set in this time period, and so I knew a little bit about the Emperor Justinian and the Empress, and like they're very very much modeled in the book, like including like the sordid past of the Empress that's controversial, also based on the actual real Empress and things like that. So like I was a little bit familiar, and I just read some other things that were set in this sort of time period. So I think that was part of it. Is this one didn't feel quite as fantastical to me because I was more familiar, whereas the other books I read, I was less familiar with the time periods. So even though there were lots of parallels to history, it was more like I was still experiencing it. But yeah, I saw it coming a little bit, but the thing is too, is it didn't make the experience any less. And like the way that happened, where you see both Alexana and the Emperor, they both figure it out and they both know it's coming. And the way that they both react to it is very like them as characters too, because he's like, okay, I'm going to start thinking about this and try and talk my way out of it, because that's what he's always done. He's the thinking emperor. He's always strategizing. And she's like, I'm going to run and plan my revenge and like get this, you know, and it was more of a her thing, you know, using her acting skills. And so like the way they go about it, it's very them, but just like seeing it happening, knowing it's going to happen. And like, it was still like edge of your seat, I feel like, for me at least.
And the Emperor, he made a mistake. Like we see him be very believably smart and thoughtful, but he made a mistake in keeping the Dalanoi alive. Like he thought he was going to be able to use, you know, Stylian and her family nobility and basically use her like as one of his weapons. But like he was wrong. He was wrong about like, you know, of what it might mean to have killed her father and for that like vengeance to be that strong, like in someone. Like he didn't understand that, and so he made a huge mistake. And I think it was Aliana who he didn't listen to on that. Like she maybe tried to tell him, you know, to get rid of them earlier. And interesting that like an act of mercy and like, but he really got what, you know, what goes around comes around for him, because he did murder to ascend and plot himself, and so he was not ruthless enough to maintain his position. That was really interesting. Just the what was involved there.
Oh, I don't know what happened to my camera.
Yeah.
Okay,
I was gonna say, I'm like, did we lose you? So no, I'm glad you're still here.
Yeah.
I think go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, in that scene when like he's going through the tunnel and he hears the footsteps behind him, like I thought, like there were so many things about that scene which were just so compelling. But just his internal monologue of like instantly he knew, okay, like they're after me, like I'm more or less screwed. And like his main two feelings, if I recall correctly, were like, first for Aliana, like he felt sad for her, and second, like he just felt disappointed. He's like, there was so much stuff that I wanted to do, and like I just won't get to do it now. And I was like, oh man, like that disappointment thing was just, it hit me in the feels so hard. I was like, you poor man. Like,
Yeah, it was really powerful. And it all came down to, because, which I thought was very true of the character, he just didn't get why people don't behave in logical fashions. And I love that as a detail, because he's just like, logically, just like, does Stylian not understand like what I'm doing here? That, yeah, eventually she's gonna get to, take over, when I'm done, all that. It was just like, oh, I didn't realize that emotion was gonna override that, which again fits for the character, because it's not like he's just cold and emotionless or anything, but he's very, like, from the get-go, the first time we see him in Sailing to Sarantium, he's a big thinker. He's always trying to think of the logical thing. And so I love that kind of last thought, like, okay, I guess maybe hate is stronger than I realized and outweighs this. And you get to see that with Stylian, that it's just nothing ever mattered, nothing was ever going to be good enough. She just wanted her revenge, and until she got it, that
yeah.
was all it was going to be.
And it's
Oh, we
sad
got
because she had so much
so
too, right?
I've been ignoring comments. Oh, here's the one that's about this here.
It
Those
was
were
a
some
great
great
chapter.
scenes, for
And
sure.
like the king's murder chapter too is kind of tied to the whole chariot race sequence too. So like that whole long sequence was really something else. Like we could go back a little bit to like the setup too, like with the chariot race, but like that was to just take it back to that. I loved, one of my favorite parts of that whole sequence was how like Kay really got across that what the chariot racers did was like truly masterful and genius and dangerous, and like he had the blues, I think Astorgus, like the leader of the blues faction, we got a POV from him who had been a chariot racer, like watching what they like the moves that they made play out. So like he's one of the few people that really understood like the genius of it, and it just like brought him to tears to see the genius of the chariot racing tactics and maneuvers, with Scortius also being wounded, and like that was amazing from Kay, giving us Astorgus's POV. And then like he was so angry at the Green Racer for like giving like a cheap shot to Scortius, and like he went over and almost killed him after. And then Kay, like I love the little details we get like about like the little riot that played out, and how like the Greens rider and Astorgus both like came before the judge for their actions and like got a fine, but like they like nothing else came of that. Like they agreed that was like the end of their dispute. I don't know. It was little details like that Kay is just amazing with. But I'm having trouble, because it's been a few weeks for me, remembering like how the chariot race connected to the scene with the Emperor. Like, did he leave before that chariot race, and like when that's when he was going to the tunnel?
Yeah, I think he was like there for the morning races, and then he left. Was it like a lunch break during which he left or something? There was like an intermission or something, and he left. And then
when he tends to always leave early too, because he's like, I don't have time for this. I have important papers and stuff. And so I think they figured he would leave. But it's because you have, and that's where just the epitome of Kay is these master scenes like this that are like the linchpins of the book. And you're coming at these scenes from a lot of different directions, because you have the chariot race and you have the actual race, and then you have like Cleander and his really important part he plays in this. Like for him, this is literally
Oh, Nico froze for me.
Yeah, I think he might have died.
Even said it's like, and it's the chariot race.
Oh, you're back. You're back.
Oh shoot, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
The last I heard was
I
that
think
the important part that Cleander played.
Yes. Okay. I think my internet's been a little bit screwy the last couple of days. I don't know where bad weather. We've had ice storms and stuff. But anyway, so yes, so we have the chariot race, which we're seeing that, and we're seeing, stories like you mentioned. We have the actual chariot race happening, including the new rider and Scortius and all of that. And Cleander, his part, really important. It's the day his childhood ends. It's a pivotal moment for him as a person. And then we also have the murder of the Emperor happening and all of that with the Serentine fire, all of these plots. And then Guy Gavriel Kay is like looping back in, like just like that laborer who died on that farm and everything. And it's the comparisons there. And that was one of my favorite things thematically here. It more than because you had the legacy, but also it's just the exploration of when something hits closer to home. Because yeah, like the Emperor dying, that's huge. It's going to have massive effects on a lot of things. But if you're just out on this isolated farm and one of your laborers dies, and now you're like, oh my gosh, are we going to have enough help to survive and get everything harvested? Like that's like earth shattering for you. You don't care about some emperor who died somewhere, And so I just the way that was all tied together is just a masterclass in writing a super super epic scene. That's this collection of POVs, and that's the kind of stuff that just nobody does it quite like Kay does it with those linchpin scenes. And there's always at least one really big, beautiful, coming from all directions kind of scene like that in his books, in my experience so far. And gosh, he just does them so well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there's still definitely some people who die for sure.
Yeah,
they got good doctors,
Yeah, so like even going into this book, I feel like I've been super hyped up for the chariot scene because like Jake and Kyle and all these people are like, oh my god, the chariot scene's the greatest scene of all time. There's like nothing better in literature.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh geez, okay, wow, okay, this chariot scene better be incredible or whatever. But it's interesting because like Nico was kind of alluding to, the chariot racing itself was cool. The race itself, I even preferred the race in book one, to be honest. It was pretty cool what happened there, but it was everything else that was happening around it, which made it so compelling. And
yeah, the fact that Scordius was like bleeding out and on his last legs, like literally, and like that added so much drama. That he almost got killed by his lover, before he went out. Like that was, and then cheap shotted by the green driver, and the drama too with like, I can't remember his name, but the new number one driver for the Blues,
Taurus, I think.
Yeah. Like that was a cool character too. Like he got elevated and he thinks he's gonna be this like number two driver, and then
I was trying to figure out the name. It's like Terrence something.
Yeah.
And then he's forced into the number one slot, and he's just losing all these races, and he's like miserable. And then
you feel for the
like
guy.
And like finally, like Scordius comes out to like help him, and it's just like that added to this sense of drama and catharsis a little bit.
But it was also so cool because Scordius is like this legendary charioteer, and he's like, "No, I'm gonna ride second, and I'm gonna make sure you win." Right? And you're like, "Oh man, that's like a proper bro moment."
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And like the details too that were involved. Classic K of like, he set this up where like they traded a certain horse to the Greens for like Taros the driver, and then like Scordius knows that horse, and he knows that horse is gonna freak out if he's like right next to the crowd, and like using that bit of knowledge to like create the major moment in the race of like, him crashing the Greens chariots. Like perfect.
That was
like
such a great little detail.
Yeah.
Also, it has to be said, like
for sure.
Scordius getting stabbed was so dumb.
Oh, go ahead.
You mean like after he left the Sheeran's room?
Yeah, like he's like, oh, I'm gonna try to I'm just gonna sneak into Sheeran's compound and talk to her, which was like, okay, a bit creepy, bro, but sure. Then he goes and does that, and then like he's just leaving, and guess who's there but Cleander, who just loves stabbing people, it seems. And he like chase him down and stab him. It's like, what is happening here?
I think that's fair. That's fair. It was that was a little bit over the top, which there were a few things like that where it was kind of done for the melodrama. Like Heidi commented that there are a few very, very melodramatic things, which I agree. It was a bit much, but
the thing, like, don't get me wrong,
I thought were interesting.
I didn't dislike it. I thought it was awesome. But I was like, this is also so stupid. You know, like...
Yeah,
It's
there were definitely a
Leander,
couple like
you can't stop
yeah.
stabbing people.
that was some solid melodrama, and there's also that weird like the tax guy who's like has these like evil vile habits that keep on getting alluded to, and like there's this creepy carriage hanging out in the city at night where like people notice this creepy carriage, and we get this like quick little POV of this random like drunk soldier going to talk to the guy in the carriage, and like Kay is like, we never hear from him again. Like that was some cool little allusions to just like what weird stuff is going on with this tax character who then shows up in the tunnels at the murder of the emperor, like that he's gonna capitalize on this somehow, and he's just like he's kind of like loving seeing like the emperor get murdered and get like torched, and then he gets torched himself. Like that is just like that was some weird interesting stuff that I kind of liked. Just some extra little melodrama going on, a little flavor.
So I'll jump back quick to a couple of the comments here that I missed, but as a teen wanted the sex scenes and don't like them as older. I can get that for sure. Now, this does worry me a little bit about Brightness Long Ago, you guys. So I don't know if you agree with this comment.
I don't remember much like graphic, explicit stuff. Like this and Lord of Emperors seem much more explicit than anything in Brightness.
I can definitely remember one scene, but I don't think it was that bad. It was fine.
I mean, it's all subjective, I'm sure here. But
yeah.
And then Heidi said that Queen having an affair with the general. There was like a really small mention of which was that the general that it was with specifically. Now I'm trying to remember.
I mean, she ended up as the empress to the general Leontes.
Yeah, at the end, but because there was the comment about her like trying to secure a place because she sleeps with somebody, because there was the comment about how she was a virgin at the time, and I'm trying to remember if that was him or not, but I remember that happening. Oh
yeah.
Oh, Ben, you're in trouble.
Yeah, no, if you haven't read Sarantine, don't stick around. Evie, definitely don't get spoiled.
She
on
just
this.
came to yell at you. Apparently I double booked you, it sounds like, but
no, like I was on earlier, just Pete had like a post Dragon Steel convention kind of stream, and I joined him for a bit, but then I had to leave to come back home for this in time. So, but I was on there for a while. I was on there for like a half hour, so
fair enough.
Might have dismissed me.
But yeah.
So I think in that scene where Crispin hooked up with Staviani, like the crazy lady, in that same scene, like her husband, she was pretty sure was hooking up with someone, right? So was that implied that he was hooking up with Giselle? I'm not sure.
Now I'm drawing a blank. I don't, if I could remember what part it is, because it specifically does I shouldn't lean that far away from the mic. It specifically does mention, but I don't remember where it was specifically. But could be.
Okay, because otherwise, like Giselle just went and met him afterwards at the end, and she was like, "Yo, why don't you marry me? And everything will be good, right?"
Yes, because that did happen, which I thought that was a really great way, and just a callback to the beginning, because that was her whole plan, is like, hey, I'll marry the emperor, and I'll save my country and also give him power. And obviously it didn't work out, and she kind of felt was just sort of there, in stasis for a while, but then she gets to accomplish her original plan at the end as well. And so that was I thought that was just a really, really cool like wrap around full circle moment, and just then immediately she's like, all right, Emperor's dead, here's the plan, let's go, Crispin, get me in there. And like no hesitation, because she was like, I mean, she was talked about like, yeah, she's a young pretty woman and all that, but she was like very much always talked about like, she's the son of a king who is very politically savvy and everything, and she's every bit that. And so she was always absolutely like just trying to figure out her strategy and schemes and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that was a nice wraparound.
Yeah, because when she actually met the emperor, she's like, oh, I can't actually replace this empress, because like this emperor and empress, they actually really like each other. And I guess like when she saw, oh, emperor's dead, okay, now I can shoot my shot. That's what happened.
See, this is where having the ebook would be good though, because I love ebooks
Yeah.
because I can search for something really quickly.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's just gonna annoy me because I'm trying to. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to actually find. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to actually find it or not, but I don't think so.
What was the emperor's plan with going to war? So he was gonna send his army west to conquer Batiara, but he also was aware that the
Bassanids,
the Bassanid emperor was gonna attack. So like he was not gonna be surprised by that, and it seemed like he had some plan. It wasn't clear though what that was, but then Leontes basically did not go for the invasion and then fully wanted to crush the Bassanids after. But I was kind of curious what like the emperor had up his sleeve. Like I wanted to see his like clever planning play out, and like to see him have Crispin complete the sanctuary, and like him getting killed, and like this very like religious, like conservative kind of guy take over and like basically say, Crispin, like you're out. We're gonna like remove your mosaic, your grand masterpiece. Like that was so sad. Like
yeah, that made me sad. I was like, come on.
and like seeing how upset like the architect Artabasos was about that, like that was great. But it did result in what I thought was a very satisfying closing, where he did like in a place that was kind of out of the way, where it wasn't going to be on display for everyone, but like for him, he was able to create his own masterpieces like back home. And I still got some of that catharsis around him completing his art and having his artistic vision come to fruition, and honoring his dead wife and daughters, and then like I was not expecting him to create a portrait of the Sarantine court, but it was like it felt really fitting that based on his crazy experience over there, that was really meaningful, and he met all these really larger than life personalities, and that he would immortalize them, and the emperor and Aliana. So I don't know. I liked where it all went towards the end.
Yeah.
So
really
quick,
the way.
and I'll loop back there, but I did find the answer, because actually, funnily enough, it was from Goodreads when people were talking about theories while reading the book.
Ooh.
And through that, so Giselle did hook up with Leontes the Strategos prior, and that's who it was, because somebody had a theory that she was actually the one behind the emperor's death, because she was trying to find a new emperor so she could marry him, which I don't think it's the case at all, but interesting theory too that somebody had early on in the book. So but yeah, there's the answer. So but yes, the mosaics too, and I liked that you had here's the court now, and then here's like my court, like here's the people that were really important to me, and it was still kind of his way of getting his say in this little chapel nobody's probably ever going to see anyway, and he doesn't care. It's just that. But that was where, like, so him being there doing that, I just still, and like I said, I didn't hate the ending by any means, but I wanted that to happen. And then like if somebody still showed up, it would have been fine, but for it to be like just somebody else and just to see it and like say something about like, oh, nobody's ever going to see this, and he's like, that's okay, it's still there. And like he leaves, he goes off exploring on his own. It ends super open-ended. Maybe we check in we see that Sheeran did find someone else or just decided she didn't want anybody. We get a little glimpse of Aliana on that farm somewhere. That was my theory that did not come to pass, but like a little just a glimpse of her off somewhere. That was kind of like that was what I wanted, and I still think he did a really good job with the ending. And I still enjoyed it. But that was where I'm like, really? She comes to be with Crispin. I'm like, really? I'm like, I wasn't a huge fan of that little
But
bit
you
personally.
know, the one thing about that scene, I loved it as well. Just echoing what you guys are saying. But the one thing about the Aliana coming is it fully mirrors the end of book one, right? Because at the end of book one, he finishes with the mosaic, and it's like he looks down and a woman entered the thing, and that's
And
what
she smiled. She
and
smiled.
she smiled, exactly, right? So then you're like, who's she? Like, what's going on? And then in the end of book two, it's the same thing, same person. And I don't know. I thought that was kind of a neat little touch. And the first thing
I loved the symmetry of the two endings. Like that couldn't have worked better for me. Like, I absolutely love that he ended both books with like the same line, same kind of moment, but different times and situations. Like, I just, what a flourish. Like, to me, that was just such an amazing ending flourish. And you know, and I'm invested in these characters. I was much more invested in Crispin, I think, than you were, Nico. And so like him getting like this nod at a happy ending where he could start a new family and, you know, have a maybe new children, and Aliana, who hadn't had children before and wanted them. Like it was two hurt individuals who had lost loves kind of coming together. That to me was like, yeah, it's a little sappy, but I love it. It made me feel happy there at the end, and I love the flourish of the same ending to the two books.
And it did fit. Like, I mean, that's where, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like it was bad. It wasn't the ending I wanted, but it was fitting. And I feel like it was really going in the direction it was very specifically mentioned. You know, even Giselle, when she's like her letter to Crispin, like, go out, find a wife, start a new family. Like, that was like the directive to him. I mean, like, it felt like that was where it was going to go. So it fit. It made sense. I didn't think it was bad. It just was like that last little dig of Crispin for me. And I just, like, since I wasn't a big Crispin fan, but yeah, the symmetry was really nice for sure.
Also, I had predicted in our last chat that I thought it might be Giselle who came to see him, who smiled at the end. And then at the start of this book, after we get the Rustem prologue, and we're back with Crispin, Kay pulls a trick. He shows Giselle coming into the sanctuary to visit Crispin. I'm like, it was Giselle, I guessed right. And then that was not the same moment that the previous book ended on. He then does a flashback to Aliana coming. He's like, oh, something similar with another woman who had come to visit him when he was on the scaffold. And it was like, oh, okay. The previous book ended with Aliana coming to visit him. That was who smiled up at him. And so, yeah, that was an interesting
He
little...
loves to do that.
Yeah.
He loves his little misdirects.
He has so many misdirects.
Just because you haven't read Lions yet, you said, right?
No.
Because just wait, because there is a particular scene where it almost goes too far because there's something hugely momentous happens, but you don't know who it happens to.
Yeah.
And he keeps showing you almost getting to where you find out, but he doesn't. And it's like, it's so true. Good, but it's just like, what is happening? And it's such a good scene, but it's just like you keep getting so close and you don't know because it could be several people from the way it's done. It's like he likes to do that.
That's funny. You know,
gosh.
By the time we got to that ending, I was just happy that Aliana was okay because I like her, and I was like, man, I'm worried for you. I think I even messaged you guys.
I remember you commenting that.
Like,
you're
at
like,
this point,
I don't know if she's okay.
Yeah, more or less. So like when she showed up, I was like, this is fine. This is good. We can end here. Like, everyone's happy.
Fair enough. So Heidi says, who's more poetic, Kay or Williams? Have you guys read Ted Williams?
Nope.
Not yet.
Wow. Okay. I feel like K is the right answer here. Tad Williams does have amazing prose, and I do recommend you guys read Tad Williams, but K definitely feels more poetic to me, I would say.
He does crazy things with sentences, man. Like sometimes I read his paragraphs over and over. I'm like, you're not meant to do it like that. But he
Nice.
did, and it's good. And I'm jealous. That's how it comes.
Yeah. That was where I found a single typo, and I'm just like, what is happening here? Because it was so weird. And it was just something like that. It was so different. It just was like jarring more than it would be normally because it's K and everything's usually so perfect. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, what's happening here?
Yeah.
But
those are the toughest typos to catch, though, where the mistake makes a real word that also is like you have to analyze the meaning to know that it doesn't make sense. Like, so that's tough on the editors. I don't
for sure.
I don't blame them for one of those every now and then.
It's
like one letter difference. Yeah.
At some point, it's going to happen in every book for sure. So,
oh man, I just opened up to a random page. And there's like these short one-line paragraphs. The one line is an exaggeration with truth in it, and then another one-line paragraph. And so the world changes. It changes in every moment, of course, but there are ... degrees of change. Like I love
that.
Like omniscient narrator. Oh really?
Yeah.
I love omniscient narrator K coming in. Like it just has this really cool, wise, poetic feel to it.
And it's got such a magic with like not repeating sentence structures. That's like a major pitfall that authors fall into. If you read like Faithful and the Fallen, like every second sentence has the same structure. And it gets so tiring after like I don't mean to pick on that one series in particular, but K is just so good at it. Like everything flows beautifully, but it's never repetitive. And I don't know. He's worthy of studying, I think.
My big complaint with Faithful and the Fallen is characters constantly go, huh, so many times. To the fact people say that to me in Discord regularly just to tick me off, like as a joke. But yeah, that was my nitpick. There's that, and then there's a book I won't name, but if you know, you know, where the author used capital OK constantly in a fantasy setting. It drove me nuts because it just sounded weird. It wasn't even like the word okay, it was like capital OK, which is a specific like 19 or 1880s American thing or something, and it's like this doesn't make any sense. It drove me nuts. Sometimes those little things would just get me. So usually they're not those little things. Okay.
Like reading this and then Wind and Truth, like it highlights K's strength in prose writing. Like the word choice here, it immerses you. Like even though this is not language that is like, you know, the same type of language that would be like Old English or early modern English, like it's very modern, very much modern English, but like the particular word choices and rhythm, like it helps me just stay immersed in this older feeling time in a way that like Sando just doesn't. When in Truth, like with so many like 21st century modernisms, and it's like you as an author, because those types of like modern phrases and slang are little bits of like idioms that are very modern, like you're probably always using them in real life or thinking about them, so you got to be really careful as an author to not use them if you're trying to give the book more of like an older feel. And so K is just brilliant with like his word choices and just like helping me never like think like, oh, that was in like an inorganic bit of internal monologue or a modernism or like I'm sure he's having characters think about their emotions, but if he did, I like it never registered as like inorganic or as like inorganic exposition in the way that it is in Wind and Truth for me. Like or maybe he doesn't have characters like really think through their internal psychological states.
No,
like
there's way more subtext for sure. Like there's less like being like blatant about this is how the character is feeling. But then also like the language choices are so internally, I guess, consistent, where it just feels like the book has its own language, right? Which is what we're enjoying.
When it's very, yeah, he's very masterful with showing and not telling. Because it's just when you read the books too, it's just you feel like, or at least I do. I'm assuming you guys agree though, and that I can talk for you on this. You feel like the characters are real people. They just
Mhm.
feel very organic, and it's like when they do something, it's like that's what that person would do, and it's just uh, that's something he's also really good at, where you can see even if you're not told, you can see the complex emotions that are happening with these people and the situation they're in because they're established just so well, and it's definitely a strength. And Kay's prose in general, he's just phenomenal. His prose, and yeah, I agree because I like another author's prose that I love, Janie Wertz, who she does use a lot of kind of like archaic words and everything, and it gives you a very specific feel that works super super well for her writing as well. Kay does it completely differently, and it fits what he writes so incredibly well too.
Yeah.
And so I think that's having the great prose, but also having it give you the right feeling. I it excels for sure.
I think like the thing is when you're so strong on a sentence by sentence basis, like as an author and as a reader, and you're reading a book where the sentences are flowing beautifully from one to the other, the story's like pulling you into it, then you forgive small things, right? And it's like, oh, it's the Empress at the end of Crispin. I don't like that, but actually I don't mind because I love the book so much. Because just like 99% of my reading experience was just this awesome like flow state immersion, that what actually happens almost doesn't matter anymore, you know?
That is 100% how I felt with this book. I have complaints, and I've talked about them here, but while I was reading them, I didn't care. While I was reading this, all I could think about is like, gosh, this is amazing. I love it so much. And that's why, like, coming back and thinking critically, I still have some issues with this. I did think that this was a lot better than Sailing to Sarantium for me personally. But it's just like my experience, I was so immersed. It was really, I had to come back and think about my critiques afterward because I was having such a good time during that. It's just none of the little stuff did matter that much. And this where even if he goes a bit of a different direction, it's Kay is just someone who he brings you on the journey, and if his style clicks with you, it usually clicks so hard. And I've seen some people who it does not click for,
Yeah.
and as with any author, you're going to have that, and it's just it's. I feel like Kay as an author, it would be hard to feel like middling on because
Yeah.
I feel like it's gonna work and you're gonna love it, or it's
Yeah.
just not gonna work and you're not gonna like it. But um,
I have a point of comparison to Sanderson here. So like the start of chapter 9, we do get a tiny bit of introspection into psychology, but here, listen to what this is. Crispin, in a mood he'd have been unwilling to define, was beginning work on the images of his daughters on the dome. That same morning when the Empress Tarantium came and took him away to see dolphins among the islands of the Straits, like, all we get about his internal state is that he's in a mood he'd have been unwilling to define, but we know that he's starting work, and that like we can then imagine ourselves like how we would feel if we're gonna be depicting our dead daughters.
Yeah.
And so like Kay leaves it more to
I mean,
us to imagine his mental state rather than actually putting all of his internal thoughts on it, because like it's also a little unrealistic a lot of the time, the way that like you might see someone on the page, like in Wind and Truth, seeing characters think through all of their emotions and like what's brought them to this point and what their like state of mind is at the moment. Like I think a lot of people's real internal monologues in intense moments is more just like muddled and like they're just feeling emotion. They're not necessarily voicing all of these like psychological insights to themselves.
it's
So
also
just like yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's more powerful when you leave it open for interpretation, because those emotions that we can all imagine them a little bit differently than each other, right? Wind and Truth, literally the first line of the book is Kaladin felt good. Great. I'm happy for you, bro. Like, what do you want me to say? Like,
pages elucidating on that. But so just for fun too, which this is completely different because this is not character introspection, but here's just the start of chapter 1 of the last book of Horus and Light and Shadow. No spoilers. Very different, but stars like luminous dust thick as glittering smoke, hazed the jagged crack in the rock ceiling high overhead. Sight recorded the image as awareness resurged after red rage and a virulent explosion of pain had hurled living consciousness into a call of oblivion. And we're starting to describe somebody from that.
Oh, that's intense. Yeah.
That's pretty intense. Yeah, I'll have to bring my A game when I do my channel reread.
It is not. It's not for the faint of heart. It is something you really do have to focus on. But for me, although very different writing, for me, it was also something that I just felt so immersed in while I was reading. And in her descriptions, also something that Gianni's prose, people either are going to love or hate for the most part too, because some people are just like, that's too much for me, but I'm just like, so good.
Yeah.
And K is less dense, it seems like he's very readable.
Yeah.
It's just like it's elevated language. It's like slightly elevated from the normal pedestrian style of prose writing.
Yeah, it's like you can tell the thought went into it, right? Like a lot of thought. It wasn't just word vomited on page.
Yeah, and that's where there's definitely the kind of levels, because K is like elevated but still very readable, and Gianni too, especially sometimes it takes a little bit for it to click, but it is very thoughtful in the descriptions, and sometimes like descriptions are so much more meaningful than you could ever realize at the time that you're getting them too, because there'll be these little things with it, but it's like, she will paint a scene in a way that is just like unmistakable to know exactly what it is. And I think some of it comes from she's also an artist, so the way she writes, she's really, really painting like exactly what she wants you to see. And it works really well for me. Very different style. That's where I'm like, we'll do the different levels. Kaladin felt good. Crispin was in a mood he wasn't willing to define.
That start of Wind and Truth, it really does flag like what the style of the book is going to be, though. Like it doesn't hide like what style of the book, like, but that is such just like the opposite kind of start of like attempting to do any kind of subtext. It's just like, this is how he felt. Like,
and then it goes into like the next 2 pages of this is why he felt that way, and you're like, thanks. Like, there's not much to think about, I guess.
I'm noticing now as I've been reading K and like hearing Nico talk about Wirtz, like the value of description. So like the way that authors can hint at characters' internal states through, description from their POV or even from an omniscient kind of perspective, or just like description and dialogue, just like the work that those can do instead of just having people's thoughts laid bare fully. And I think I'm coming to really respect the authors that can accomplish a lot through just description and dialogue rather than mining, everyone's internal dialogue for every bit of psychological insight or exposition.
That striking that balance with like how much introspection you're going to put on page is always kind of tricky. And I mean, I think different people like to read different amounts of it. Like some people might read this book and be like, I have no idea what any of the characters are feeling ever, and I hate it. but I think like there's this, for a certain audience, like this is perfect. Like it strikes the balance really well.
And there's a huge audience for that in fantasy too, because like I think the literary world, well, it's similar. I've read literary books where it's like all introspection, and then others where it's like all subtext. But like in the fantasy sphere, like Malazan is an example where it's like a big series where, it's like you don't get much introspection, and like Erickson just leans as far away from that as you can. And so like I do think there's just a lot of different kind of sub audiences within modern fantasy who really love the deep introspection. Like I'm seeing reactions to Wind and Truth where it's like a lot of people I think really love Sanderson leaning into the emotional, psychological, internal monologue stuff. And so that is going to work for a lot of people, and that's great. And I'm somewhere in the middle. I think it's working less for even you two. But
Yeah. It's and it's one of those things. And I apparently complaining about Sanderson is very good for your channel. If you guys want any tips, by the way, because I
wow,
still
that
an
video did well for
utter
you.
it's at like 3.3 thousand views. I think last I saw, it's got
Wow.
like hundreds of comments. I've gotten like 30
Wow.
subscribers from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's blown up. I'm pretty shocked because I really didn't expect that and for the most part, even there's been plenty of people who've agreed, and there's been plenty of people who are like, hey, I think you make fair points, but I still really liked it anyway, which is also great. I did have one person who commented that they're absolutely in the audience that book is for, because I commented, I feel like it's trying to appeal to a wider audience. They're like, hey, actually, that's me, so I think it's great. And I'm like, hey, well, there you go. Like, it's having the desired impact. The audience that he's trying to make it work for, it's obviously working for, and there's nothing wrong with that. And like, Sanderson's a lowest common denominator author, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. He stated very clearly that he wants anyone to be able to read the books. And whereas a lot of my favorites are very much, I always have to say, not for everyone, because a lot of people are going to be like, this, I don't like this at all. Like, I don't like this, I hate this, it's not my kind of stuff. And whereas, like, if I'm reading like reviews for a book on Goodreads, and like, oh my gosh, it was too slow, we just were like looking at all this stuff with the world, I was bored, I'm like, ooh, what's this? So it's like, it's, everybody has different taste. And I know a lot, like, most of my favorites are very hit or miss for people, and I get it. And that's why whenever I talk about my favorites, I'm like, here's somebody this would work really well for. If you are this kind of person, you might really not like this. And, that's okay. And Sanderson has just gotten further and further away from what I like, unfortunately. And so it makes me sad, but also I'm happy with putting it down. And when you put down Wind and Truth and then you go back and you finish Lord of Emperors, you're like, I made such the right call. Maybe it was bad timing, but I did that. And then, like, now I'm doing Stephen R. Donaldson, Thomas Covenant, and he's goes a little over the top with the archaic or what's it, the library ladder says, his obscure vocab words that he likes to use. Because if I never read the word benison or percipience again, it'll be too soon. Because he will not stop using those two words.
Oh man,
Just also
I've never
driving me a
heard.
little bit crazy, but
I've never heard either of those words before. Yeah.
yeah, benison is like a gift or a blessing of some sort, and percipience, granted, is the reason it's mentioned is because a person has percipience, but it's like a really weird way to say, like, comprehension, and it has more
Ah.
meaning. But, like, come on, man. So, even though I'm really enjoying that, it's driving me a little bit crazy with the word choice there too.
With how much you both love K, I'm gonna give him a little bit of a rest now. I want to get to the point where I am starting to miss it, because there's not that much more K to dig into, like his historical fantasy. There's Tigana. For me, there's the two like alternate China books that I'm really excited for. There's the two other ones. There's like the one kind of sequel to Brightness Long Ago, which I want that Brightness to be kind of fresh for that one. So that might be my next one when I'm kind of missing K. I think that one's oh god, All the Seas of the World. Then Children of Earth and Sky takes place a little bit before Brightness, but it's kind of like separate. And then there's like the Viking one, Last Light of the Sun, Tigana. I mean, there's a bunch, so I'm not in danger of running out. But I wanna leave it a little bit until I find myself missing the style. Or are either of you just like, you want to go full steam ahead and read everything he's written?
So I'm gonna regret it, but I am definitely next year. I'd like to read most of his books. Um, and it was good timing because I read Lions shortly after I finished reading Janny Wirt's entire bibliography, barring the Empire trilogy with Feist, which I still will read. But I'd finished all of her books, and I was like sad. I'm like, well, crap. What do I do now? And then I pick up Lions of Iverson, and I'm like, that's what I do. I read Guy Gabriel Kay now.
Yeah.
So,
After K, I'll read Words. Yeah, exactly.
it was like it was serendipity. Like, it could not have been better timing to be like, I need another author to just absolutely make me want to read their whole catalog, and that's definitely Guy Gabriel Kay. It's not often you read a single book from somebody and they become one of your favorite authors and one of your favorite
Yep.
books of all time from your
Yep.
first one.
Yep.
I just
Yep. That exact thing happened for me with a Song for Brightness. I think it happened for Z. For Z, it happened for you with Brightness, right? Like he became like immediate kind of favorite author.
Immediate
like
hit. But you know, like now,
I
don't like. I'm conflicted on whether I like Lord of Emperors or Brightness more. Like I'm
Oh
very
wow.
much. Oh man, they're both contending for that spot. But like for myself, I I definitely want to read Song for Arbonne and Lions of Valorant because you guys have all been hyping it up like so much.
Highly recommend.
So I want to get in on this, but I also have that instinct to like savor it. So I'm kind of like Ben in that sense. But I think I could read those two because everyone else has already read them, and then I don't know when other people are ready to go into Under Heaven or something, then I'll jump on that train as well.
I think my current rating.
Really want to read Brightness.
Oh, you'd love it. You'd love it. It's incredible. My current rating, like they couldn't be closer together. Like it is the ultimate exercise in splitting hairs. But I will say my first experience is still on top, Song for Arbonne, and then I think of Brightness Long Go, slightly below that, and slightly above Lines of Valorant, and then Sailing to Serantium, Lord of Emperors. Kind of, I love them both. Right below.
Heresy.
Wait, have you? Oh yeah, because I don't have Lions at the top.
I'm just joking.
I mean,
I feel like if I would have started with Arbonne, if I would have started with Arbonne, I wonder if I'd feel the exact same way because they have a lot of similar beats. They do, but I don't know. Like Lions just blew me away. I just fell in
It did. It's a masterpiece. But like objectively, Song for Arbonne had me more emotional. Like I was shedding real tears for a long time in the final act of that book. And so like I know objectively it like reached me more deeply than any of these others, but it's a perfect book. Like I have no complaints with any of those three standalones. I think overall I just didn't love the Sarantine Mosaic books as much. I just never got as engaged and invested in this particular set of characters and plotting, and I just didn't love the focus on the Sarantine court politics. I think I was really just like taken away by the stuff that happened like on the journey and Crispin's artistic kind of journey. Like that was some of my favorite part of this, and then the court politics of Sarantine really took over the series like almost fully for the last like 3/4 of the series, and so that really intrigued me a little less. And I'd be interested to hear from you all. Like, I'm having a tougher time, I think, taking away major themes than I was from like the standalone books I've read. Like, I think it was easier for me to kind of take away a few kind of clear themes, but this one it's a little harder. So I was curious to hear like what you think some of the main thematic takeaways were from the whole Sarantine Mosaic. I think like legacy would be one, maybe like your artistic legacy or what you leave behind through your political acts or artistic ones. Like that was a major one, but I'm also struggling possibly to find other big thematic takeaways.
I think legacy was a really, really big one kind of throughout. And like I said, I think thematically it dealt a lot with loss and how close it is to you as well. I talked about it a little bit earlier, which I thought there were a lot of kind of repeats of that where it showed there were so many people that the loss that happened to them was just the most important thing to them. With the farmer, with Alexandra, it was the emperor. With Styliana, it was her father. She could never get over it. There were a lot of people that had that happen. And with Crispin, even from the beginning, it was his family. That was his big loss. And so like loss and how it affects people differently, I think was something I noticed recurring a lot as well.
Kasha losing her whole life, like her whole family and home life. And that's a good point. That's a major theme that's carried through with a lot of characters. Yeah.
I thought it was like you guys said, so legacy I think seemed like the biggest theme. Religion as well, like when we talk about Heidi just mentioned it as well.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. Like
like the
religious
conflicts.
schisms and things. And
Exactly, yeah. It seemed like more of a minor theme, but I think that the two big ones, so Legacy and Lost, and then what people do to move on from it, like how Crispin was so lost, and then he found new purpose in like, okay, now I have this chance to like make this amazing mosaic, and I have this amazing opportunity, and then at the end, that's also taken away from him, right? But he ends up in a different place than where he started, where the first time, like he was at the end of his rope, like he had nothing to lose at the beginning, right? Like he lost his family, and he's like he's basically just given up on living. But then at the end, like he lost the great mosaic that he was that had become his new purpose in life. But through that journey, he met new people, and he found like new reasons, and saw how different people live. Like his horizons expanded. He saw like the great city of Sarantium. It was like this great big adventure. And then, like he builds himself a new purpose. Like, okay, I want to memorialize this like adventure that I had in my life in this new mosaic. And I think that was also kind of thematically powerful. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think, and Ben, you actually just read a perfect line for it, but change was something that was a big theme with just, obviously with the core thing with the Emperor dying, but even at the end too, where it's after all of this, and it's like, yeah, we're going to be changing how the religion works from now on, and not going to be doing it. And so there were a lot of like things as well, which had varying impacts, but I think we did look a lot at change as well. But legacy definitely being like the number one, though, that was a really important part. Which, yeah, I did laugh at this comment, by the way, too, as well. But so speaking of, because I know Heidi was super important for me to get to it as well. But did you guys get like the really big Lions Easter egg with the ending?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, because it doesn't come right out and say it.
I mean, I haven't read it, so.
No, it mentioned someone went west. Wait, who was it?
Yeah.
Who was it that went west to Esperania? It was
I will be a little bit vague because it's not really a spoiler. But so Rustam, he travels to the forming country of España, and starts a ranch with his son, who has visions of the future. And so he might just, it's strongly implied that he might just be the ancestor of a particular character from Lions. And so, yeah, it doesn't come right out and say it, but you'll see. I'm sure when you read Lions, you'll see like, oh, yeah.
Yep. No, I forgot that because it's been a few weeks, but I did catch that great little Easter egg. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was a good one. And oh yeah. Yeah, that was great. And he wrote this after Lions, so he kind of knew what he was doing very intentionally, just like for readers of both books. Like, yeah, definitely. And this,
it works going either way, I think, honestly.
Yeah. And I think Brightness, like the references to the city of Sarantium, worked really well without having read this, but certainly now for you, Nico, like you've spent time in Sarantium, and so references to the city in that book will hit a little harder.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in Brightness which will hit a bit harder for sure.
Yeah, that's probably going to be the one I do next. I know I need to read Tagana because it's like the big one that everybody talks about that I haven't read yet. But I'm just like, from things I know, and I'm sure I'll get over it. It'll be fine. But like from things I know, that's going to be the one that's going to be a little less to my taste, even though it sounds really good. But yeah, I'm still I'm going to read all of his stuff.
Brightness is short too.
That's why I looked. I'm like, this is actually short for a K, and so that's why I was going to pick it. But I will say, as a complete aside, his Fionavar tapestry so jarringly different. So jarringly different when it starts taking place at a university in like Toronto, and like It's so weird. I
Oh, I
started
can't
it and I
wait.
put it down because I just was not in the mood for it. But a friend of mine was going to read it, and he doesn't like classic fantasy, so he bounced off of it very quickly. But I started it like it was really jarring. I'm like, I'm going to come back to this later because I'm going to read it. I am excited because
Yeah.
I do love classic fantasy, so I think I will really enjoy it. But it was just so different for Kay, so that was that was fun.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to like come back to that and be jarred and be like,
Yeah.
whoa, this is not the GGK I know. Oh, I can't wait.
Very different, intentionally different. Like it's still really like the bit I had. It was still really well written, but it's very different. So,
Oh, you know what? I might do
uh,
that next. That might be the K I need to do next to then leave some space between the historical fantasy ones. Wait, Z,
well, let me know
what
when
are
you
you? Oh, nice. Z, what are you feeling like with your GGK journey? Are you in the mood for picking up more soon?
Yeah, for sure, man. I can't wait to read more. I think I am trying to decide if I'm going to read Arbonne or Lions next. So one or the other.
Either would be a great choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is true. But I
Lions is in the connected universe, which is you now have read 2 books in the connected universe.
Oh, Arbonne isn't? I thought
no, it was he started his historical fantasy career by writing Tigana and A Song for Arbonne, and those 2 are just in their own separate standalone universes.
Okay.
And then it wasn't until the next book, Lions, that he was just like, you know what? I'm making this world building stuff. It's working, and I can just set every book in there, or most of them. I don't think the China books are in the same world. I don't believe. I don't think so. Yeah.
I was planning to read Under Heaven first. That was always my intention because I just thought the premise sounded really cool. But then Ben, you dragged me into A Brightness read along, and then you dragged me into.
Yeah, my bad.
I was planning on reading almost anything but Serentine Mosaic because this was these are like the 2 books I did not own copies of. I have like all of his other books, like literally all of them.
My bad.
There might be 1 or 2 that I still don't, and I'm like, of course you guys want me to, but I mean I did anyway. So
my FOMO on this was too strong because like I've heard from a lot of GGK fans just like rave reviews about Serentine, where it's like this felt like after the 3 standalones I'd read, like the biggest gap in my GGK reading life, and so like I was just my FOMO on it. I just needed to know, and now
I get negative
I have a certain.
FOMO.
Oh, you can? Oh
no.
I am so this giant weight is now off my back. Like I feel like, man, okay, I could take a break from GGK now.
Now, see, Ben, because like what happens with me is when I hear all of these GGK fans going crazy about Lord of Emperors and Lions and Arbonne, I'm like, okay, those are the 3 best books. So if I read those, then there won't be the best books to read anymore. So I have to read them last. I have to read like the worst books first. You know,
it is a blessing and a curse because I don't think any of his books will ever top Lions for me. And part of that, I think it was my first experience. And so it's special because it was my first guy ever. Okay. It is a masterpiece of a book too. Don't get me wrong. But I think just that was my first time. I do wonder if I would have read Song for Arbonne because I think they're of comparable quality. They are both phenomenal books.
Yeah.
But it just was, I read Lions
I do think
first.
Lions might have hit harder if I had read it first too. Like that's why like Zamar's first experience with Brightness Long Go, like that hit so hard. Like nothing might top that, but maybe the fact that Lord of Emperors is close goes to show like how great this book was because you were already familiar with the style and so you know that like do you think Z that you like this book better than Brightness, or where are you at? Are you not sure? You're not sure?
Don't ask me this question. I don't know how to answer it.
The problem with Lord of Emperors though is that it's a second book, so like it has the advantage of being like more going just downhill because we accomplished so much setup in book 1.
There's more resolution.
And so, like,
but
it's like if you look at Serentine Mosaic as one book, it does,
yeah. But it's still it's using what was built.
Yeah. And like stylistically, they're so different. Like I mentioned this when we talked about Sailing the Sarantium, but A Brightness is very experimental. And it's almost like it felt a little bit more difficult to read just because like the author brain was on being like, he's changing tents. Like, what are all these crazy things he's doing, right? And I mean, I loved it. Don't get me wrong, but like with Serentine Mosaic. Sorry, I don't know why I messed that up. Serentine Mosaic. It just felt like a more standard fantasy book for the most part, and just style, the way it's written. You know, you follow these characters. There's not too much crazy experimentation with like writing conventions going on. So in that sense, it was like, okay, easier to follow along, but it was also kind of missing a bit of that magic that Brightness had. So
that's fair.
Yeah,
that's
the Brightness being first person retrospective too, like it had a little extra bit of like magical nostalgia working for me through that first person retrospective framing device.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, it wasn't always that. Like, sometimes it was first person present, and you're like, what?
Yeah,
and then the next chapter is first person past, and the next chapter is third person past. And you're like,
I'm gonna have to read this really soon.
Yeah, you should. Like, Brightness is, I would say it's a very special book. You know, like it's a really special book.
definitely. And Heidi is like just like daggers to my heart with like DNFing Song for a Bone. Like that to me is just like gobsmacking. Like, give it a chance, pick it back up, it's amazing. And
which she did come back and like it after.
Oh, she did.
Alliance.
Okay. Oh,
she
good,
said,
good.
Yeah.
Good.
She went back after. So, but she does not seem to like Brightness though very much.
Oh, I loved it. I just like I totally fell in love with all the characters there, and just like when I'm immersed in a book, I like characters are not likable or unlikable. Like, I'm just living through their eyes, and I'm just like empathizing by completely inhabiting their existence. Like, when authors can get me living right with the characters, like that's my dream as a reader. Like, I don't want to be thinking like, you know, oh, I'm liking this character and I'm enjoying the decisions they're making. They're multifaceted. I'm like, I just want to be living through their eyes and be taken away and swept away. And Kay does that so well for me. Like, all these characters are likable, and the fact that I'm enjoying spending my time with them.
Yeah. It's we probably should be wrapping up here soon. But, I will I'll mention that because I really love the quotes. It's from the Library Ladder, that channel. He has a great video talking about Guy Gavriel Kay, and I love his quote that talking about Guy Gavriel Kay and his work. His books range from the truly great to the merely very good, which I think is so true, because like the worst I feel like you're gonna get with Kay is, oh, it's only very good. Like, but it's true, because like I complained so hard about Sailing to Sarantium, I still thought it was really good, and like, even though I had complaints here, I'm like, I still loved it. So that's definitely one of those things. But I will jump back because I realized I missed it. But Heidi mentioning Between Two Fires, which if you guys want a really different historical fantasy, I do highly recommend this book. It's like historical fantasy horror with a lot of religion focus. It's a crazy book.
So, okay, Nico, I DNF'd it earlier this year. I'm sorry.
Oh no. I'm so sad to hear that. That is one I loved, but nobody else seems to love it as much as I do, I will say. So but is like, oh, it's crazy. I don't know.
No, like I really appreciate his writing. Like, he's such a talented writer, and I love The Black Tongue Thief. But like, Between Two Fires was so dark. And like, it's set in,
it's very dark.
It's like brutally dark. And the thing is, like, because it's set in, I mean, okay, there's like some what's it called, horror elements, but it's kind of like based on real world France in the 1300s or whatever. It just felt a bit too real to me. So I was like, I couldn't handle it personally.
I mean, I feel like that's a compliment to the book, even though you didn't like it. I mean, but it has some of the horror elements, but it is more like historical fiction. Like, the fantasy elements are more so the horror elements, but it takes place during like the Black Plague, during the heart of it. while there's like a literal war on hell on earth, like literal hell on earth, like demons coming because like God's distracted or something, and like that's the plot of this book, and it is very dark. And my gosh, the ending too goes even darker than you can probably imagine. It's at one point.
I do think what Z said is it had me intrigued, just like that it was so dark and real feeling. Like if I'm in a certain mood, maybe that
give it a shot if you're feeling like that. But it is I totally get not.
By the way,
for it, but
as we wrap up, how great is Kay at titling for the series? Like I love the individual book titles and also the series title. Sailing to Serantium, it takes on so much more meaning beyond just the idea of like, oh, people are sailing to Serantium. Like it's an in-world saying that has this thematic meaning of going on a journey, and then like I had no clue what this title meant until we kept on getting that quote about uncrowned, like, and that quote was just like so powerful and poetic, and that the way it repeated, and it's like this title like really hits, and also just like the duology title, the Sarantine Mosaic, like it just feels so perfect. Like this ensemble cast that we got, this mosaic kind of novel, but also like the actual mosaics at the heart of the narrative were so impactful, and the way it ended with that as well. So like, man, he did a great job with those titles.
I think like all of his books have really compelling titles, if you ask me.
I think
Heaven, Brightness Long Ago, it's like that's something.
Yeah. Oh, that title, really that title. After you read the book, that title hits so hard. Oh my god, that title just hits.
I'm gonna have to start it like this weekend. I think
it's so good. It's so good. Oh my god, I wanna reread it. I'm almost getting the urge to reread Brightness. Like,
oh gosh, I'll make sure I share my thoughts with you guys as I go for sure.
Yes, yes, please do. Please do.
But yeah, I'll for my final thought, I will mention, because I think where you bring up the titles though, and it being called the Sarantine Mosaic, and a mosaic being a greater piece of art that's made up from all these individual little tesserae, I think does play in with the narrative choice of having so many small characters, some of which are kind of they're put in and then they're left there, and others which build into something bigger though. But I think thinking about it more so just now talking out loud, I'm like, I it does give you that idea that like, oh, okay, that actually makes sense. Certain parts you're building a bigger picture, other parts are just there. You need your little tesserae to be a part of it as well. And so I think that
well done. Well said. Well said.
That's well said. Yeah, like something, so just coloring in the background. Like I thought that Cassia would end up having a bigger role in this book. Not really, but like
same.
Vargas was basically had no role, but the role he did play was memorable.
Yeah, exactly. And
book one.
And the thing is, like Kay does a thing where like he just gives enough detail to all these minor characters to make them feel very real, and then more importantly, make the world and like Serantium as a city just felt vivid and real, right? Like this rivalry between the blues and the greens, and by the end of the book, like you know who's who in which faction and like what all the drama's about, and it just felt like real, right? Like that's the best word I can come up with.
What's nuts is that like how crazy the Sarantine situation and setting in politics and characters felt in the prologue for book one, like where we just have no clue what's going on, but like by the middle of this one, where it's just like we have a feel for every like the situation and the history and the politics at play. Like we were totally floundering at the start, but like by the middle of this one, we're just full steam ahead. We get the picture and know what's going on. No, it's
But on that note,
thanks for coming on this. Thanks for coming on this journey with me. This was great. I definitely had a much better time having Buddy read it and being able to do it with you guys. So thank you so much.
Well, yeah, thanks for inviting me along, because I had a great time. And thanks, Heidi, for hanging out with us for nearly 2 hours to talk about this as well. So. All right.
The birds were awesome.
The birds were awesome.